My mother texted to say I would ruin my sister Sloane's wedding, so I was uninvited. They deleted me from the family group chat. What they didn't know was that I was about to add my name to a different kind of guest list, one the entire marine science world would see. My sister's wedding had vanity and wine. Mine would have international cameras on a salt marsh. I wasn't crashing her party. I was just building a wedding so visible the truth would reveal itself. My name is Lydia Ward. I am 30 years old. I am a marine biologist at the Atlantic Resilience Lab in Newport, Rhode Island. The text message from my mother, Elaine, lit up the screen of my phone where it sat on the stainless steel counter of the lab. It was direct. It was cold. It was in its own sterile way an execution. Lydia, after careful consideration, your father and I feel it would be better if you did not attend Sloane's wedding. We know how difficult things can be for you at large family events, and Sloane deserves a day without any potential distractions or atmospheres. We are sorry it has come to this, but it is for the best. We will celebrate with you another time. I read it once. I read it twice. The words potential distractions or atmospheres hung in the humid air of the lab, thick and chemical. I was the atmosphere. I was the potential distraction. I, Lydia Ward, was the variable they had decided to eliminate to ensure the success of their experiment. Outside the reinforced glass window of the lab, Newport Harbor was a perfect shade of depressive gray. The water was flat, oily, and indifferent. A distant foghorn sounded, a low, mournful moan that seemed to vibrate in my chest. It felt less like a warning and more like an announcement. It was the sound of a large invisible hand reaching into my life and pressing the delete key on 30 years of trying. 30 years of existing in the shadow of Sloane, my younger sister. Sloane, the centerpiece. Sloane, the event. Sloane, who according to the text, deserved a perfect day. A day that apparently could not include me. My phone vibrated again on the counter. A sharp, angry buzz against the metal. I glanced down. It was not a new message. It was a system notification. A small, almost comical line of text appeared at the top of my screen. You have been removed from the Ward family group chat. My heart, which had been a dull ache, gave a sharp, painful kick, a biological response to a digital execution. The rhythm of the vibration, the sudden expulsion. It was so final. They had not just uninvited me. They had erased me. They had clicked a button and I was gone. The foghorn sounded again, louder this time, as if to confirm it. I was no longer part of the mainland. I was adrift. My mind, trained to see patterns, immediately began to collate data. It sifted through the archives of my memory, pulling up file after file of being the atmosphere. The most vivid memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. I was 17. I had just won the National Science Fair. A project on coral resilience that had consumed my life for 18 months. The award ceremony was in Washington, D.C. It was a big deal. Or it should have been. I remember standing in the living room, my cheap suit jacket feeling too large on my shoulders, my presentation board leaning against the wall. My father, Victor, was on the phone. He was explaining to my high school principal why we could not attend. Sloane, who was 15, had a final fitting for a prom dress. Not her prom. Mind you, she was attending as the guest of a senior, but the fitting at a boutique 3 hours away was apparently an immovable critical event. Victor, I can take a bus, I had said, my voice small, already tasting the defeat. He had held up a hand, impatience radiating from him. Lydia, not now. We cannot split the family in two. Sloane needs her mother for this. It is important. He had turned away, and that was that. I watched from the window as he, my mother, and Sloane drove away, their laughter audible even through the glass. I unpacked my suit. I put my trophy on the shelf. When it arrived by mail 6 weeks later, in the back of my closet, I had won a national competition, but I had lost the family primary. Back in the lab, the hum of the filtration system was the only sound. I looked away from the phone. I picked up a small sterile pipette and turned my attention to the tray of coral cultures in front of me. These were my subjects. Fragments of Acropora cervicornis, staghorn coral, fighting for life in a controlled environment. I was trying to breed a generation that could withstand the rising ocean temperatures, the acidic water. They were pale, almost translucent, but they were alive. They were trying. I carefully, meticulously adjusted the nutrient flow to tank 4. Unlike my family, this work gave back exactly what I put in. It did not ask me to be quieter or smaller or different. It simply asked for data, for precision, for dedication. And when I succeeded, the results were clear, quantifiable, and beautiful. There was no ambiguity in a surviving coral. There was no emotional subtext. It either lived or it died. It was honest. The lab door hissed open, breaking the sterile silence. Nicolas Alvarez, Nico, walked in. He was the lab's lead robotics engineer, the man who built the underwater drones that allowed me to see the deep reefs I could not reach. He was solid, practical, and the only person I knew who understood my preference for data over drama. He was not Asian, a fact my mother had pointed out with audible confusion the one time I had brought him to a family dinner. But Lydia, what would you even talk about? She had asked, as if shared biology was the only prerequisite for conversation. Nico held 2 cups of coffee, one black, one with the precise amount of oat milk I liked. He slid one onto the counter next to my phone, his eyes flicking to the screen, then to my face. He did not ask what was wrong. He just waited. I pushed the phone toward him. He read the message from my mother. He read the notification from the group chat. His dark eyebrows drew together, not in sympathy, but in a kind of focused analysis. He processed the information, then looked at me, his gaze steady. So, he said, his voice calm. What is the objective here, Lydia? Do you want them to see what they are missing? Or do you finally want to see clearly who they are? His question hung in the air, displacing the foghorn, cutting through the chemical smell. It was a good question. It was a scientific question. What was my hypothesis? What was I trying to prove? I picked up my coffee. It was warm. I said nothing. I did not have to. He knew my silence. I turned back to my terminal, away from the grey harbor, away from the phone. I minimized the spectral analysis I had been running. I opened a new document. It was a blank, white, empty void. It was a new experiment. Nico's question echoed in my head. Who they are? I knew who they are. The data was conclusive. 30 years of field notes proved it. My fingers moved to the keyboard. I did not text my mother back. I did not try to call my father. I did not reach out to Sloan. I started to type. It was not a reply. It was a different kind of list. The heading was simple, guest list. Underneath, I did not write Mom, or Dad, or Sloan. I wrote Dr. Aries Thorne, Woods Hole. I wrote Callan Riley, Scripps. I wrote Marcus Fenway, RL. I started to write the names of the people who had shown up. The people who had co-authored, who had reviewed, who had challenged, and who had supported. The people who, when I presented my research, listened to the content, not the atmosphere. I stopped typing and looked at my reflection in the dark screen. I needed to re-verify my own worth. To recalibrate my internal senses. I pulled up my professional metrics. It was a sterile, comforting exercise. 5 peer-reviewed papers in major scientific journals, 2 successful deep-sea survey completions in the last 3 years, 1 grant application funded for $250,000, and I thought with a grim, cold smile, 1 recurring figure alone in every family photo where I had bothered to show up, the data point that did not fit the curve. My eyes drifted to the large monitor on the wall. It was displaying a thermal imaging map of a reef system off the coast of Belize. A project Nico and I were consulting on. Patches of bright, angry red indicated severe coral bleaching. It was a map of stress. I had looked at these maps for a decade. But today, I saw a new pattern. I saw it where the water was hottest, where the stress was most extreme, the coral either died, or it activated its most radical survival mechanisms. It expelled its symbiotic algae. It changed its very nature to survive. It became hard, pale, and focused on one thing, living. People are the same. I realized. When the environment becomes toxic. When the heat is turned up, you either bleach or you survive. I turned back to my blank document. I typed one final line at the bottom of the screen. A new protocol for myself: stop asking for permission to exist. My phone buzzed again. I did not have to look at it. I knew the vibration. It was Sloane. I glanced at the preview. Hey Litty, Mom told me you are not coming. I am so sorry. I know things are weird with you right now. I really hope you are okay. It is just all so stressful. You know, let's totally catch up after the honeymoon. The tone was practiced, polite pity, the assumption that I was the one who was weird, that I was the one who was not okay. It was the same tone she had used when I got passed over for a promotion. The same tone she used when my last relationship ended. It was the tone of the winner comforting the loser, a gesture that cost her nothing and reinforced everything. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I could send her the data. I could send her the long overdue invoice for my emotional labor. I could send her a thermal map of our family, with her as the red boiling center, and me as the cold deep blue on the edge. Instead, I pressed archive. The message disappeared. I looked at the guest list I had started. I looked at the line I had written: stop asking for permission to exist. A strange feeling bloomed in my chest. The world compressed itself into the 4 walls of our small rented apartment in Providence. A cold, early autumn drizzle was spitting against the window panes, a stark contrast to the warmth inside. The air was thick with the scent of garlic browning in olive oil and the sharp, fruity smell of a cheap white wine simmering in the pan. We were making pasta from scratch, a messy, therapeutic ritual we had adopted. Flour dusted every surface, including my t-shirt and Nico's beard. Nico was meticulously feeding a sheet of dough through the hand-cranked pasta machine, his brow furrowed in the same concentration he used to calibrate a deep-sea drone. He was quiet, as he often was, but it was a different kind of quiet, a loaded silence. He cleared his throat, and the mechanical whir of the pasta crank stopped. Lydia, he began, not looking at me, his focus suddenly intense on the handle of the machine. That thing I mentioned back in, I think it was April, after the keynote in Boston. I said something. We had been celebrating a successful presentation, slightly drunk on overpriced bar wine, and he had, in the most Nico way possible, presented a logical argument for the consolidation of our personal and professional resources. He had called it a long-term partnership proposal, and then, terrified by his own burst of sentiment, had said, we can just table that. The data is incomplete. I turned to face him, wiping a flour-caked hand on my jeans. The data is incomplete, Nico. Or you were just waiting for a better variable. He finally looked up. His eyes were dark and serious. And for a moment, the engineer was gone, and it was just him. The variable was never you, Litty. It was always me. My timing, my execution. It was a bad presentation. So I am trying again. He left the pasta machine and walked over to me. He did not kneel. He did not have a box. He just stood in front of me in our tiny kitchen, with the rain hissing outside. Lydia Ward, he said, his voice low and steady. You are the most brilliant, frustrating, and essential person I have ever known. You are my primary data point, my true north, my home. The previous proposal is officially scrapped. Here is the new one. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build things with you and argue about methodologies with you and be your lab partner, and, well, everything else. Will you marry me? The garlic in the pan was starting to smell dangerously close to burning. The rain tapped. My heart, which had been a cold, hard knot all day, suddenly felt warm and full. Yes, I said. It came out as a breath, a puff of flowery air. Yes, Nico. Absolutely. Yes, he smiled. A wide, genuine smile that lit up his entire face. He reached into his pocket and pulled out not a ring box, but a small, worn-out velvet pouch. From it, he tipped a simple, thin band of brushed silver into his palm. It looked like a piece of scientific equipment, precise and unadorned. I know you, he said softly. I know you hate diamonds. They are just pressurized carbon with a good marketing team. This is, well, it is just silver, but it is real. He took my left hand, his own warm and slightly rough, and tried to slide the ring onto my fourth finger. It stopped at the knuckle, blocked by a sticky residue of flour and dough. We both looked at it, and then we burst out laughing. It was a stupid, ridiculous, perfect moment. I washed my hands at the sink, the water running warm over my skin, and he slid the cool, smooth ring onto my clean finger. It fit perfectly. We ate pasta, standing up in the kitchen, drinking wine straight from the bottle, our hands sticky with dough, and mine now bearing a circle of silver. Later, curled up on the sofa, the sound of the rain our only soundtrack, he asked the inevitable question. So, how do we tell everyone? Do we start a new group chat? The warmth in my chest cooled slightly. I thought of the Ward family chat. I thought of the text message. I thought of the lifetime of data I had collected. No, I said, my voice firm. We do not. He turned to look at me, questioning. I am not telling them, Nico. Not my mother, not my father, not Sloane. I am not sending an announcement. I am not waiting for a response. I am done. Done as in you will tell them later. Done as in it does not matter. My uninvitation was a boundary set by them. This is my boundary. Silence. I am not performing for them. I am not giving them another chance to review my life choices. This, I held up my hand, the silver ring catching the dim lamplight. This is for us. It is not for them. My silence is the new boundary. Nico watched me for a long moment, processing. He was not judging. He was just analyzing the new parameters. Okay, he said finally, nodding. Okay, no announcement. That simplifies the logistics. So, the next problem to solve, venue. I had been imagining a sterile room at the Justice of the Peace, a 5-minute formality, a signature on a line. The courthouse in Providence is pretty efficient, I offered. Nico winced. Litty. No, that is where you go to fight a speeding ticket. Not this. He stood up and started pacing the way he did when he was debugging code. It needs to be meaningful. It has to have purpose. It has to be us. He stopped in front of the window, looking out at the dark, wet street. Where is us? He mused. He snapped his fingers. Oh, of course, he turned back to me, his eyes bright with a new idea. We do it at the preserve. We do it at Gull's Lantern. Gull's Lantern Preserve, Cape Ann, Massachusetts. A wild, beautiful, protected stretch of salt marsh and rocky coastline that our lab used as its primary research site. It was where Nico tested his drones. It was where I tagged and monitored my coral cultures. It was where we had spent hundreds of hours in freezing cold and sweltering heat, doing the work we loved. It was not a venue. It was our cathedral. A slow, profound wave of relief washed over me. It was so perfect. It was the opposite of Sloane's opulent, flower-filled, look-at-me wedding. This would be a wedding with a purpose. A wedding that was not about the party, but about the place, vowing our lives to each other. On the very shore of the ocean, we had dedicated our lives to protecting. Nico, I breathed. That is the best idea you have ever had. I have good ideas, he grinned. The next day, the guest list document I had started was still open on my laptop. I deleted the old title. I renamed it. The list started simply, our lab team, the survey crew from the *Arvum Nautilus*, our old mentors from graduate school, Nico's family, who lived in Arizona, and thought our ocean obsession was charmingly eccentric. Then I paused. There was one name, a big one. Should I asked Nico, pointing to the screen. You have to, he said, not even looking up from his schematics. She is the godmother of your entire field. I took a deep breath. I typed in the number. My fingers were shaking slightly. It was one thing to email a research proposal. It was another to call her at her home on a Tuesday. The phone rang 3 times. A brisk, slightly accented voice answered. Lang, Dr. Lang. This is Lydia Ward. Lydia, she said, and I was floored that she recognized my voice. Dr. Petra Lang, the woman whose papers on ocean acidification were the literal foundation of my entire career. A living legend. I am just reviewing your latest paper on larval dispersal. Your methodology is bold. I am not sure I agree with your conclusions, but the data is clean. What do you need? I stammered. This is not about the paper, doctor. This is, personal. A heavy silence. Personal. My partner, Nicholas Alvarez, and we are getting married, and we are doing it at Gull's Lantern Preserve, and I would be so honored if you would come. Another silence. I could hear the sound of papers shuffling. Ward, she said, her voice suddenly sharp. Why are you getting married at a salt marsh? Because, I said, my voice gaining strength, it is the most important place in the world to us. It is not for show. It is for the work. I heard her take a long, slow breath. Good, she said, and her voice had warmed. Just a fraction. That is the correct answer. The world does not need another party. It needs more work. It needs more commitment. All right, I will be there. And listen, Lydia. Yes, Dr. Lang. Lang, if you are going to do this, do it right. This community, our community, we are the ones who show up. Let me make a few calls. We will make it a proper convocation. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling. She said, yes, and she is making calls. Nico grinned. Pack a lunch, Litty. The giants are coming. The next few weeks were a blur, but not of wedding planning, not in the way Sloane would understand it. I was not looking at flowers. I was looking at title charts. I set the date and time, October 19th, at 5:30 p.m., sunset, low tide, the moment when the water would be at its furthest point, revealing the bones of the coastline, and the light would be sharp and golden, cutting across the marsh reeds. We sent out a simple digital invitation. The guest list grew, not with distant cousins and my parents' business partners, but with the names I cited in my papers: biologists, oceanographers, engineers, and conservationists. We had one firm, internal rule. I discussed it with Nico, and he agreed instantly. No children. It was not because we disliked children. It was because I refused to participate in the pageantry of a flower girl, or a ring bearer. I had seen too many family events where a bored, fussy child in an uncomfortable outfit was paraded around as an emotional prop, a living symbol of continuity and innocence. It felt false. It felt, in its own way, like a kind of exploitation. If anyone has a kid, they can get a sitter. This is a working site. It is not a photo opportunity. This story is not about that. Agreed, Nico said. No emotional props, only data. I went into my phone settings. I found the muted Ward family thread, which was now just a one-sided feed of Sloane's wedding updates. I found the notifications for my extended family, a web of aunts and cousins I barely knew. I turned them all off. Mute, silence. Then I went into my other apps. I turned on notifications for the National Weather Service. I activated alerts for the Cape and tidal flow. I set a reminder for the lunar cycle. I was muting the static. I was amplifying the signal that came from the wind, the water, and the work. That was my family now. Dr. Petra Lang was, above all else, efficient. She did not make calls in the way my mother did, full of gossip and veiled social maneuvering. Petra Lang executed directives. 2 days after our phone call, my inbox, usually a quiet stream of data logs and academic listservs, exploded. An email from Dr. Lang herself arrived first. It was not a message. It was a manifest. Lydia, it began, foregoing any pleasantry. The following individuals have confirmed their attendance and require the logistical packet for Gull's Lantern: Professor Kenji Watanabe, Kyoto University; Dr. Elena Sophia, Max Planck Institute; Dr. Samuel Harding, University of British Columbia. They are all rearranging symposium schedules to attend. Do not disappoint them. I stared at the names. This was not a guest list. This was the editorial board of the most prestigious journal in my field. These were the titans. The names on the theorems, people. Watanabe was essentially the father of modern biorobotics. Sophia had mapped the mid-Atlantic ridge by the time she was 30. Harding was, well, he was Sam Harding, the man who proved the viability of deep-sea carbon capture. I was simultaneously thrilled and nauseated. Before I could reply, a second email came in. This one was from a name I did not recognize, Sophia Tilson, with a corporate signature I absolutely did. Tideline Studios. It was the largest, most respected streaming platform for scientific and natural documentaries. I took the call on speaker. Nico standing beside me, his hand gripping a cold cup of coffee. Dr. Lang. Ward, Sophia Tilson. I am a senior producer at Tideline. Her voice was fast, smart, and immediately engaging. Petra Lang reached out to me. She said, and I am quoting, "My 2 favorite researchers are getting married on a salt marsh, and you would be an idiot to miss it." Petra is persuasive. I am not sure what you mean, I said, my throat suddenly dry. We are not, it is a private event. I understand that, Sophia said smoothly. And we respect that. Let me be very clear. We do not do reality television. We do not do wedding shows. We make documentaries. We tell stories about the planet. What Petra described to me, a lifelong commitment to the ocean symbolized by a lifelong commitment to each other, that is a story. She called it Science Meets Love. We want to capture that authentically. What does authentically mean? Nico asked, his voice skeptical. It means we are a shadow. One cameraman, one sound operator. We do not stage anything. We do not ask you to do that again. We do not interview your family about your childhood. We film the environment. We film the work. And we film the ceremony. The context is the key. The marsh, the tide, the science. That is the story we want to tell, the truth. Nico and I looked at each other. The word truth hung in the air. That was what this whole thing was about, wasn't it? My family had built a life on performance. Sloane's wedding would be a masterpiece of illusion. We had opted for truth. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You can come, but you follow our rules. The science comes first. And I added, thinking of my new rigid boundary, you do not film anyone who is not on our approved guest list. Deal, she said. And that was that. A third email arrived. It was from a photo agency in New York. Petra had also called. Apparently, one of the most famous nature photographers in the world, a man who usually spent his time dangling from helicopters over volcanoes, was offering to shoot the wedding for free, simply because he wanted to be in the room when that many brilliant minds gathered by the sea. The guest list, our simple spreadsheet, became something else entirely. It was no longer a list. It was a map. As the RSVPs flooded in, we had to add a new column, country of origin. Nico, I said, staring at the screen one evening. We have 12 countries. 12. There is a team from the Norwegian Polar Institute rerouting their flight from Svalbard. Someone from the Auckland Citation Lab is piggybacking this on a trip to a conference in Boston. This is not a wedding. It is, he insisted, pulling me away from the screen. It is ours. It just has a very impressive peer review component. The situation escalated when the internal link, the one we had sent only to our invitees, somehow broke containment. It turned out one of the lab's biggest donors, a well-meaning tech billionaire who was passionate about ocean conservation, received the link. He misunderstood. He thought it was a new creative fundraising campaign. He posted it on a massive closed forum thread for environmental activists and philanthropists. His post read, "This is why I support the Atlantic Resilience Lab. Look at this incredible symbolic commitment from their top researchers, Dr. Ward and Mr. Alvarez. They are literally getting married for the ocean. This is the future of activism." The link spread from the private thread to the public square. It was picked up by environmental blogs, then by science aggregation sites. It was a very specific kind of niche viral. We were not famous, but our wedding was. Then the article came out. It was not in a gossip column. It was an * Scientific Horizon *, a major online journal. The editor, someone who had interviewed me last year about larval dispersal, had seen the thread. The headline was professional, factual, and utterly devastating in its impact, a small marsh wedding with a Nobel-caliber guest list. The article listed the confirmed attendees, Watanabe, Sophia, Harding, Lang. It detailed my work, Nico's work, and the mission of the Gulls Lantern Preserve. It contrasted, implicitly, the quiet dedication of our convocation with the empty extravagance of typical celebrations. My phone, which I had silenced against my family, now buzzed incessantly with notifications from strangers. The leak created an immediate and awkward problem, money. "Lydia," Nico said, holding up his laptop. "The RSVP link is being shared, and people are asking where the registry is, where they can send a contribution. They think it is a fundraiser." He was right. We were getting emails, DMS, "Is there a ticket price?" one person asked. "How do we donate to the wedding?" I looked at the influx of messages. We could have funded our lab for a year. We could have paid off our student loans. We could have bought a house instead of renting our tiny apartment. The temptation was enormous, a heavy, suffocating weight. I saw, in a flash of terrible clarity, why my parents were so obsessed with appearances, with the right people. It was a currency. I looked at Nico. I looked at the silver ring on my finger. I looked at the title chart taped to our refrigerator. The outline stated, I thought for 5 minutes. I did. I set a timer on my phone. When it beeped, I had my answer. No, I said. Absolutely not. This is not a transaction. This is not for sale. I was not my mother. I was not Sloane. I would not use my life, my love, or my work as a source of revenue. I opened the wedding website. I deleted the RSVP form. I put a single static page in its place. At the top, I wrote a simple thank you for the overwhelming support. And at the bottom, I put one link, not to a registry, not to a PayPal account. If you wish to support the commitment we are making, I wrote, please do not send gifts. Instead, please support the work we dedicate our lives to. Here is the link to the Gulls Lantern Preserve Coral Project. Help us protect the place we love. It felt clean. It felt right. Nico, who had been watching me, completely overwhelmed by the social and financial chaos, disappeared into his workshop for 2 solid days. He emerged, covered in grease and smiling, with a small spider-like robot. It was a modified chassis from one of his deep-sea ROVs, but he had waterproofed it for the marsh and equipped it with a high-definition, long-exposure camera. What is that? I asked, touching its cold metal leg. It is our witness, he said. It is the only guest that matters. It is going to sit on the rocks just above the tide line. It is programmed to take one high-resolution photo every 30 seconds for 24 hours. It will capture the entire tidal cycle. The sunset, the ceremony, the stars, the sunrise, the tide coming in, the tide going out. It will see everything, and it will not judge. It is our time lapse. It was the most beautiful, romantic thing I had ever seen. A piece of technology built to be a silent, constant, objective observer, a symbol for our entire relationship. With the public-facing side of things settled, we focused on the real logistics. I updated the invitation link, which was now just an information packet, with a new section. Dress code, practical, I wrote. This is a working research preserve, not a ballroom. We insist on comfort. Sturdy shoes or sneakers are mandatory. The ground is uneven and in places wet. High heels are forbidden. You will sink into the marsh. Windbreakers or warm coats are highly recommended. There will be no stiff ties. There will be no ball gowns. Please come prepared for the weather, not for a fashion show. The response was immediate and palpable. A wave of relief flooded my inbox. The RSVP emails were no longer just a yes. They became personal notes. Dear Lydia and Nicholas, one wrote, thank you for reminding us of what this is all about. We are coming for you, and we are coming for the sea. Another, from a rival biologist, said, it has been 10 years since I have been in the same room as Petra Lang without arguing. I would not miss this for the world. The event had a momentum of its own. But as I finalized the catering, local clam bake, oyster shuckers, and hot cider, all served in compostable containers, a cold, practical thought entered my mind. The leak, the articles, the fact that our small marsh wedding was now globally recognized within our community. My family would see it. They would not see it from me, but they would see it. Sloane, obsessed with her own image, would be monitoring social media. My mother, obsessed with her social standing, would hear it from one of her friends who read the wrong kind of news. They would find out the date, they would find out the time, and they, unlike my mother, were capable of viewing me as a potential distraction to crash. Nico, I said, interrupting his coding. We have a security problem. Tied line, he asked, not looking up. No, my family. He finally looked up. You uninvited them by not inviting them. That is the boundary, right? It is, I said, but I have known them for 30 years. They do not respect boundaries. They see them as a challenge. What if they just show up? The thought of my mother in her cocktail dress and heels trying to make a scene on the marsh. The thought of Sloane arriving with her own photographer, trying to reclaim the spotlight, it made me cold. I would not let them ruin this. I would not let them make this about them. I did not hire guards. I did not want uniforms or a metal detector. This was our sanctuary. Instead, I made a pragmatic choice. I called the preserve's head ranger, a no-nonsense local man named Dave, and explained the situation. He agreed to be on site, just to manage the entryway and ensure all guests were on the list. Then I went to the rental company. I need 10 chairs, I told the coordinator. Just put them in a row. Way in the back, behind the sound equipment, behind everyone. Do you want name cards for them? She asked. No, I said. No name cards. They were the seats for the uninvited. They were the seats for my family. If they came, they could sit, they could watch, but they would sit in the back. They would be the audience. They would not be the show. Finally, with all the logistics in place, I sat down to write my vows. I thought about Sloane. I imagined her vows would be full of words like, forever, always, my soulmate, my prince. I looked at the silver band on my finger. I looked at Nico, who was soldering a backup battery for his Tide robot. I thought about the work, the data, the cold warnings, the failed experiments, the shared victories. I opened a new document. I did not need flowery language. I just needed the truth. I wrote down the core of it, the thesis statement, marriage is a lifelong research partnership. I kept writing, building on that foundation. It was a contract of collaboration, a pledge of shared data, a promise of rigorous, compassionate peer review, a vow to support the fieldwork, no matter how cold or dark it got. It was, I thought, the most romantic, most unbreakable promise I could possibly make. Sloane's wedding day, which was also 2 weeks before my own, arrived on a Saturday. It was, according to the weather app, a perfect day in the Hudson Valley, 72 degrees. No humidity and a sky of uninterrupted, cinematic blue. I knew this because I was, in fact, checking the weather. But my check was for Cape Ann, Massachusetts, where it was 51 degrees, raining sideways, and the wind was clocking in at a steady 20 knots. It was, in other words, a perfect day for testing the new estuary drone stability in adverse conditions. While 300 guests filed into a historic ivy-covered manor in the Hudson Valley, I was pulling on a pair of insulated chest waders. While they were being handed glasses of champagne with tiny suspended raspberries, I was double-checking the battery seals on a $7,000 piece of equipment. The information from Sloane's wedding came to me in unwanted, fragmented bursts, primarily from my cousin Beth. Beth was my one ally in the extended family, a cynical corporate lawyer, who viewed these events with the same anthropological detachment I did. She was my embedded reporter. The first text from her arrived just as I was loading the drone into the truck. It was a picture, a single, towering, 7-tiered wedding cake. It was a monstrosity of sugar, an architectural feat of white fondant and cascades of imported orchids that were not native to any environment within a 1,000-mile radius. 7 tiers, Litty, the text read. It has its own zip code. The flowers alone probably cost more than your last grant. Places crawling with people who look like they were cast in a perfume commercial. I looked at the photo. The cake was impressive in the way a supernova is impressive, a massive, beautiful, and utterly sterile explosion. Does it serve a structural purpose? I texted back. It is here to intimidate the other cakes, she replied. Got to go. Father of the bride is about to speak. Pray for me. Nico was at the lab, running a final diagnostic on the time-lapse robot, giving it a 24-hour stress test before our day. I was alone with the survey team, a group of 3 graduate students, who were more comfortable talking about sediment layers than their own feelings. It was perfect. Okay, team, I said, zipping up my windbreaker. The rain was already plastering my hair to my head. The wind is high, the tide is coming in, and the salinity is going to be all over the map. This is where the data gets good. Let's get to work. I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I was not being asked to be smaller or quieter. I was not a potential atmosphere. I was the project lead. The next text from Beth came 2 hours later. I was waist-deep in the marsh, my hands numb from the cold water, as I held the sensor array steady. I had to tuck the sample vial into my armpit to unclip the phone from my wader strap. Speech just finished, the text read. 12 minutes. That is not an exaggeration. I timed it. 12 solid minutes about family, about legacy, and about the pursuit of, she had quoted my father, a life of perfection. My hands were shaking, though I told myself it was from the cold. Did he? I typed, my thumb clumsy on the wet screen. Nope, Beth's reply was instant. He talked about his perfect wife, Elaine, his perfect daughter, Sloane, his perfect new son-in-law, Trent. The word perfection was used 14 times. The word Lydia was used 0. I stood there in the middle of the surging grey-brown water. The wind screamed in my ears, a high-pitched, lonely sound. 0. It was a good, clean data point. It was the complete absence of a signal. I was not an anomaly. I was not a variable in his equation of perfection. I was simply not in the equation. I put the phone away. Dr. Ward, one of the students, a young man named Ben, called out. Are you getting a reading? The sensor is offline. I looked down. My hand holding the array had gone slack. I had let it drift. My fault, I called back, my voice sharp against the wind. Refocusing. Let's get the reading from transect 4. Now, we worked for another 3 hours. The data was fascinating. The wind was churning the deeper saline water with the freshwater runoff from the rain, creating a microlayering effect I had only read about. I was ecstatic. I had data. I had proof. When I got back to the truck, soaked, muddy, and exhilarated, I saw Nico had sent me a text. It was just a link to a private video feed. I clicked it. It was the view from his workshop. He was calibrating the camera on the Tide robot. He had set up a small whiteboard in the background. On it, he had scrawled in black marker. They are performing. We are living. P.S. We are out of oat milk. I laughed so hard. Ben asked if the data was that good. It is, I said, peeling off my wet gloves. It really, really is. That evening, I drove to the main lab in Newport to file the data. I was supposed to meet Nico there. I stopped at a small independent coffee shop on the way, the kind that smelled like burnt beans and old books. As I was waiting for my latte, the bell on the door jangled. I did not have to look. I felt the atmospheric change, the drop in pressure. My father, Victor Ward, walked in. He was not supposed to be here. He was supposed to be in the Hudson Valley, 3 states away, circulating among his perfect guests. He was in a tuxedo. It was immaculate. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed. He looked like he had stepped directly off the stage of his 12-minute speech, and into this random, grubby coffee shop. He did not see me. He went straight to the counter. He ordered a black coffee, his voice clipped and impatient. I could have stayed hidden. I could have just let him leave. But my new protocol, stop asking for permission to exist. Father, I said. He turned. The look on his face was not shock. It was not guilt. It was annoyance, the look of a man whose carefully curated schedule had just been interrupted by an unplanned variable. Lydia, he said. He did not move toward me. He did not hug me. He glanced down at my clothes. I was still in my field gear. My jeans were splattered with mud, and my hair was a wild, salt-stiffened mess. I probably smelled like low tide. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice flat. I thought Sloane's wedding. I drove Trent's vintage car, he said, as if that explained everything. A gift for the couple. I had to get it back to their garage in Newport. The valet could not be trusted. Of course, a vintage car. Another perfect prop. He had left his daughter's wedding reception on her perfect day to go park a car. An awkward, terrible silence descended. He looked out the window. Looks like this rain is settling in, he said, tapping his fingers on the counter. I just stared at him. Here he was, my father, the man who had erased me from his own speech, and he was talking about the weather. It is good for the estuaries, I said, my voice cold. Right, he said. His coffee was ready, he grabbed it. Well, I have to get back. Your mother will be wondering. He walked past me. He did not say, I am sorry. He did not say, we missed you. He did not say, why were you not there? Because he knew. He was the one who had made the decision. He just left. He got into a gleaming, ridiculously looking vintage sports car and drove away. Back to the performance. I stood in the coffee shop for a long time. I did not feel sad. I did not feel angry. I felt nothing. That was the enough I felt. It was enough. I had enough data. The experiment was over. My hypothesis, that I was, on a fundamental level, irrelevant to their narrative of perfection, was proven. It was, in its own way, a relief. When I got to the lab, Nico was waiting. He did not ask about my day. He just handed me a warm coffee and pointed to his screen. Look, he said. He had 2 browser windows open side by side. On the left was a live feed from a social media tag. Sloane and Trent in perfect unison. It was a flood of professional, glossy images, the 7-tiered cake, the ice sculptures, the swan-folded napkins on the tables, which a florist was proudly showing off in a video. The 300 guests, all laughing, all beautiful, all performing. My mother had posted a photo of herself, my father, Sloane, and Trent. Her caption was, the happiest day of my life. My family, whole and perfect. I felt the old, familiar sting. The whole and perfect was a knife, and she knew how to twist it. I reached to close the window. Wait, Nico said. Now look at the right window. On the right. He had a feed from the *Scientific Horizon article. It was tracking the social media response to our wedding. It was not glossy. It was raw. Someone had found the link to the Gulls Lantern Coral project, the one I had posted. They had all, as a community, started donating. But more than that, they were posting screenshots of their donations. They were posting pictures of their own field work. A biologist in Australia posted a photo of a bleached reef with the caption, "This is why the Ward Alvarez wedding matters. This is the work." Donated. A grad student in California posted a selfie in her waders, mud on her face. "This is my wedding guest attire. Congrats, Lydia and Nico. You are an inspiration." Dr. Lang had sent me a text. It was just a screenshot of the donation page, which had just passed $80,000. Her text underneath was simple. "The field is watching you, Ward. You are setting a new precedent." On the left screen, a florist was showing off a folded napkin. On the right screen, a global community was showing off a map of a recovering reef, funded in our name. "Two worlds," I whispered. They cannot even see each other." "They do not have to," Nico said, finally closing the window on Sloane's perfect day. "We have our world, they have theirs." He was right. The two realities were running in parallel on separate tracks, destined never to intersect, until, of course, they did. It happened late that night. The hashtag for Sloane's wedding was dying down. The hashtag for our wedding, which someone had created. Hashtag Science Vows was picking up speed. And then one of Sloane's bridesmaids, probably drunk on champagne and scrolling through her feed, saw both. She saw the *Scientific Horizon article. She saw the names. She saw the date. And she posted the two hashtags together with one sentence. "OMG, Sloane, is this your sister's weird wedding? LOL. She is trying to compete with you on the same day." The parallel tracks slammed into each other. The collision was immediate, and it was loud. The quiet of the week before the wedding was a specific kind of quiet. It was not peace. It was the pressurized silence of a deep-sea dive, where the slightest crack could implode everything. The crossed hashtags had created a low, simmering tension online. But the real accelerant arrived, as I should have expected, with professional efficiency. Sophia Tilson, the producer from Tideline, sent a cheerful email 2 days before the ceremony. "Lydia and Nico, heads up. We are pushing a short, 30-second atmospheric teaser to our social channels. Standard practice to build community buzz. It is just waves, marsh grass, and the title card. It looks beautiful. We are thrilled to be capturing this." I clicked the link she sent. She was right. It was beautiful. It was a masterpiece of muted autumnal light, all soft golds and deep grays. The camera drifted over the swaying reeds, focused on the intricate pattern of water retreating from the mud flats. The sound was just wind. Then the title card faded in, "See Science." A sunset vow. It was perfect. And then I saw the location tag. They had not just tagged Cape and Orr, Massachusetts. They had used the precise geotagged map coordinates for the Gull's Lantern Preserve trailhead. They had, with the best of intentions, posted a high-resolution map and a global invitation to our sanctuary. The dive did not just crack, it imploded. It took less than 10 minutes for the first shockwave to hit. My phone, which I now kept on a Beth-only alert system, lit up. "Lydia, red alert. The Tideline post. The tag," Sloane found the tag. A screenshot followed, taken from the new family group chat I was not in. My cousin was our double agent, and she was risking her status to send this. The screenshot was a flurry of angry bubbles. "Sloane, are you seriously kidding me?" She tagged the location. She is literally inviting the public to her stupid beach party to steal my thunder. This is my wedding month. Elaine, this is the most pathetic, jealous, attention-seeking thing she has ever done in her life. She cannot stand that Sloane is happy. This is a cry for help. Victor, this is unprofessional. If she wants to call herself a scientist, she should act like one, not like some desperate influencer. Sloane, she probably thinks this makes her look smart, hanging out with her weird, nerdy friends. She's just trying to upstage me because Trent's family has money. A new text from Beth appeared. Just words this time, Litty. This is not the usual venting. They are organizing. Sloane is convinced you are trying to get a mob of strangers to show up just to get more attention. She is talking about driving up. She said, I want to see this pathetic circus for myself. Elaine is encouraging her. They are planning to drive to Cape Ann on Saturday. This is not a drill. This is a credible crash threat. They think you want them to come so you can have a public fight and be the victim. My blood went cold. Not just cold. It felt like it was replaced with icy sea water. A crash. They were going to crash it. They were going to arrive in their designer clothes, their faces masks of indignation, and they were going to start yelling. They were going to turn our sanctuary, our place of work and vows, into a backdrop for their family drama. Right in front of our colleagues, our mentors, and the Tideline cameras, Nico, who had been calibrating the drone, saw the color drain from my face. New data, he asked, his voice low. I could not speak. I just handed him the phone. He read the texts from Beth, his jaw tightened. He did not get angry. He got focused. Okay, he said, setting the phone down. Parameters defined. They are a hostile variable. We manage the variable. We have to call the police, I whispered, my voice shaking. We have to get a restraining order. No, Nico said, his voice firm. That is what they want. They want a reaction. They want a fight. A restraining order is dramatic. It is messy, and it makes us the center of the drama. We are not going to be dramatic. We are going to be procedural. He was right. I was reacting emotionally. I needed to react logically. I took a deep breath, the salt marsh air filling my lungs. This was my field. I knew the terrain. Procedural, I repeated. Okay. My first call was to Dave, the head ranger at Gull's Lantern. I did not frame it as a family dispute. I framed it as a security concern. Dave, Lydia Ward. We have a situation for Saturday. That documentary company tagged the preserve. We are expecting unauthorized guests, not fans. Hostile parties, trespassers, he grunted. Got it. You want me to turn them away? I paused. If Dave, in his ranger uniform, physically blocked my mother and sister, the scene would be explosive. They would film it. They would scream. It would be exactly the spectacle they were hoping for. No, I said, a cold, clear plan forming in my mind. No, I do not want you to turn them away. That will cause the scene I am trying to avoid. I am going to send you a separate list of names, my biological family. If anyone on that list arrives, they are to be treated as contingency guests. They are not to be sent to the main seating area. They are to be escorted quietly to a separate, pre-designated spot. Escorted where, Dr. Ward? Ward. To the back row, I said. My next call was to the rental company. Hello. I need to make an adjustment to my order. Those 10 chairs, I added. Yes, the ones in the back. I need them placed in a very specific way. A single, isolated row at least 20 feet behind the last row of our guests. No decorations on them. No aisle, just a line of chairs, a viewing gallery unaffiliated with the main event. A place for my biological family. They could come, they could watch, but they would do it from a distance. They would be the audience, quarantined from the actual participants. My third call was to Sophia at Tide Line. Sophia, I said, my voice all business. The location tag, it has created a problem. Oh, Lydia, I am so sorry. Do not be, I cut her off. It is just a new variable. My family, the ones I mentioned were not invited, have seen it. They interpret this as an invitation to a confrontation. They are coming. There was a pause. I could hear the producer's brain spinning. Lydia, this is a lot of story. No, I said, my voice sharp as a scalpel. It is not. You are here to film science. A sunset vow. You are not here to film the Real Housewives of the Salt Marsh. This is my boundary. You do not get to use my family's dysfunction for your documentary. I do not want you to drown them, as you said, but I absolutely forbid you from using them for drama. Lydia, I promise you, Sophia said, her voice dropping the producer speak and becoming real. We are not that show. We film what happens. We film real reactions. We are documentarians. Our focus is you, Nico, and the environment. If they are in the background, they are in the background. Good, I said, because I am signing your release form today, but I am adding a clause. I typed it while she waited on the line. The production company agrees that no individual under the age of 18, who is not a primary pre-approved subject, will be intentionally filmed, exploited for emotional reaction, or used to construct a narrative. Any footage of minors arriving in a state of distress will be deleted. Sophia was quiet for a long time. You think they will bring children into this? My family, I said, thinking of my younger cousins. Sloane's Perfect Life has a history of using children as emotional props. If they show up, they might bring a small child to look sympathetic. My rule is absolute. The camera does not pan to them. You do not use a child's confusion to tell your story. This story is not about that. Agreed, Sophia said, her voice now containing a note of respect. Clause accepted. We will not pan. The boundaries were set. The defenses were in place. The tension, having peaked, now receded, leaving behind a strange, clinical calm. The social thriller had been contained. Now we could focus on the wedding. Music, Nico said that night, as we sat on our apartment floor surrounded by Tide charts. We need music. A string quartet felt wrong. A DJ was absurd. It is a salt marsh, Nico said, mostly to himself. It already has a soundtrack. He went into his workshop. For an entire evening, he worked not with code, but with audio files. He did not make a playlist of songs. He created a layered, immersive soundscape. It was a high-fidelity recording of waves washing over the specific rocks at Gull's Lantern. It was the sound of wind filtering through the *Spartina reeds, recorded at the preserve last month. It was the distant, haunting cry of an osprey laid subtly underneath. No orchestra, he said, playing it for me. The sound filled our apartment. It was the sound of our life. Just the signal. The final piece was the officiant. We were stumped. A stranger felt false. The problem, once again, was solved by Petra Lang. She called, not to chat, but to direct. Lydia, you are being foolish. There is only one choice, Professor Alastair Finch. Of course, Finch. The impossibly brilliant, terrifyingly gruff, and semi-retired professor, who had taught both me and Nico in graduate school, 5 years apart. He was our shared mentor. He was the man who had taught me how to fail, and the man who had taught Nico how to write elegant code. I called him at his home in Maine. He answered with a single, barked word. Finch. Professor, it is. It is Lydia Ward, and Nicholas Alvarez is on the line too. I know who you are, he snapped. I could hear birds in the background. What do you want? I am busy identifying sandpipers. Professor, I took a deep breath. Nico and I are getting married in 2 days at the Gull's Lantern Preserve, and we were wondering if you would officiate. A long, heavy silence stretched over the line, filled only with the sound of distant gulls. Well, he said finally, his voice gruff, that is the least stupid, most logical idea I have ever heard from either of you. Fine, I will do it. But I am not writing anything sentimental. We would be disappointed if you did, sir, Nico said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Good. See you Saturday. Do not be late. He hung up. It was the night before the ceremony. All the pieces were in place. The Tide robot was in its waterproof housing, ready on the rocks. The soundscape was loaded. The quarantine chairs were marked on the rental manifest. I sat at our small kitchen table, finalizing my own notes. Not just my vows, but a small speech, a welcome. I looked at the chaos of the last few weeks, the uninvitation, the articles, the online noise, the crash threat. I had to define the terms of this event for myself and for our guests. I wrote, thank you all for being here. You are our colleagues, our mentors, our friends in science and in life. Family is not always biology. Family is defined by data. It is defined by showing up. Family are the people who come, who stay, and who truly, truly listen. It felt right. It felt true. My phone, which I had left on the charger, began to buzz. I ignored it. It buzzed again. A long, angry vibration. I walked over. The screen lit up the dark apartment. Elaine, my mother. It rang once, twice, 3 times. The ringing stopped. A text message appeared instantly. Lydia, pick up the phone. Your father and I know what you are doing. This has gone too far. The phone immediately began to ring again. Elaine. Nico looked over from the sofa. Litty. My phone was vibrating in my hand, a trapped, angry insect. Elaine. 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 She was not calling to apologize. She was not calling to ask. She was calling to demand. She was calling to reassert control, to pull me back into the old narrative, the one where I was the problem to be solved. The phone rang and rang. I let it. I walked over to the sliding glass door of our apartment, which looked out over the dark, rain-slicked street. I pressed decline. I powered the phone off. I walked back to Nico, leaving the dead, dark rectangle on the counter. I sat down and picked up my vows. I went back to work. The storm had broken. My phone, my only reliable data-driven friend, had been correct in its forecast. The aggressive cold front that had soaked Cape, and for 3 solid days, had pushed itself out to sea exactly 12 hours before the ceremony, pulling all the humidity and pressurized tension with it. In its wake, it left a cool, crystalline silence. The sky was not just blue. It was a deep, high-altitude sapphire, so clear it felt you could see the edge of the atmosphere. A light wind, just enough to be felt, moved through the preserve. The tall, golden-brown marsh reeds, the *Spartina grass, bent and swayed in a long, unified wave. They looked like an audience rising to its feet, then bowing, then rising again, all in perfect, silent unison. I stood at the head of the sandy path, the one that led from the gravel parking lot down to the tidal flats. I could see the small cluster of chairs, the faces already turned toward me. I could see Nico standing at the water's edge. He was not looking at me. He was looking at Professor Finch, who was gesturing animatedly at a piece of kelp, clearly already starting a lecture. It was perfect. I had planned to walk alone. It was the procedure. I was the principal investigator of this moment. I did not need an escort. Then a figure appeared at my side, Dr. Petra Lang. She was, as per our dress code, the epitome of practical elegance. She wore a black, high-performance down vest over a sharp wool blazer, her grey hair pulled back tightly. On her feet were a pair of sturdy, expensive hiking boots. She looked at me, and her eyes, which I had only ever seen sharp with critical analysis or impatience, were surprisingly soft. "Lydia," she said, her voice low, the Austrian accent clipping the words. "In our field, we are taught to stand on the shoulders of giants. But in life, sometimes we just need one of them to walk us down the path. Shall we?" She offered me her arm. My hand, I was surprised to find, was trembling. I took her arm, the fabric of her blazer solid and real under my fingers. And as I did, I looked up, past the assembled guests, toward the edge of the preserve, and I saw him, my father, Victor Ward. He was standing near the equipment shed, perhaps 20 meters away from the last row of chairs. He was not in a tuxedo. He was in a stiff, uncomfortable-looking navy blazer and grey trousers. He was trying to look casual, as if he had just stumbled upon this scene while bird-watching. He was failing. He was watching me. He was watching me take the arm of another, more powerful mentor, a woman who represented a world he could not access or understand. He was 20 meters away, a simple physical distance, but the data was clear. The real distance between us was 31 years, and it was unbridgeable. He did not move. He did not step forward. He did not call my name. He just watched. A ghost at his own daughter's wedding. A stranger at the edge of the field. "Let us go, Dr. Ward. The data is waiting." We began to walk. The soundscape Nico had designed swelled gently from 4 small hidden speakers. It was the sound of the preserve itself, amplified. The sound of the real wind and the recorded wind blurred into a single immersive harmony. As we approached, the 60 or so guests stood. This was my world, my reality. The front rows were filled with the people who had built me, my colleagues from the lab, their faces beaming. Professor Kenji Watanabe, who had flown from Kyoto, gave me a respectful, formal nod. Dr. Elena Sophia, Sam Harding, my old mentors from graduate school, my collaborators on 2 different continents. These were the people who, when I spoke, leaned in to listen, to argue, to engage. And my eyes inevitably were drawn past them to the back. They were there. The contingency guests, my 10 chairs, set in a single, isolated line 20 feet behind everyone else, were occupied. Elaine, Victor, Sloane, and her new husband, Trent. Dave, the park ranger, had done his job perfectly. He had, I saw, parked his official truck in a way that created a natural barrier between them and the ceremony. They were in quarantine. They were a tear in the fabric of the day, a collection of mismatched data points. My mother wore a pale blue silk dress, completely unsuitable for the wind. Her arms crossed tightly over her chest, shivering. My father stood next to her, his gaze fixed on Professor Finch, his expression a mixture of confusion and offense. Trent, Sloane's husband, looked bewildered and bored, checking his phone. And Sloane was wearing a white dress. It was not a wedding gown, but it was a short, expensive ivory white cocktail dress. It was a statement. She was a statue of ice, her blonde hair whipped across her face by the wind. Her expression one of pure, distilled fury. They all looked cold. They looked exposed. They looked, for the first time in their lives, profoundly and completely out of place. I let my gaze pass over them, a final neutral observation. Then I let them go. I turned my full attention to the man waiting for me by the sea. Petra Lang released my arm, gave Nico a curt nod as if passing off a piece of critical equipment, and took her seat in the front row. I stood opposite Nico. He too was wearing his best hiking boots. Professor Finch, standing on a flat-topped boulder that served as a natural podium, looked more like an ancient sea captain than a semi-retired academic. He was not sentimental. "We are here," he began, his voice barking against the wind, forcing everyone to focus, because commitment, like science, is not a feeling. It is an action. It is a methodology. It is work. It is the rigorous, daily pursuit of a truth. Ward Alvarez, present your findings. Nico, I began, and my voice was clearer and stronger than I had ever heard it. My baseline hypothesis for a long time was that I would be alone. I was comfortable with that data. It was predictable. Then you arrived. You are the anomalous variable that changed my entire experiment. You are the data I never expected and the data I now trust completely. So I vow this, when you go out into the field, when the work takes you deep and far, I will not be the anchor that holds you back. I will be the shore you return to, the stable point of reference. And when I am lost, when the noise of the world, when my own doubts. I did not look at the back row. When my own doubts make me question the data, you are the voice that reminds me to trust the fieldwork, to trust what I see, to trust what is real. You are my reality. I finished. Nico, who never wrote anything down he could remember, did not have a card. He just looked at me, his eyes dark and intense. Lydia, he said, his voice thick with an emotion he would never log in a report. I have spent my entire life building machines to see in the dark, to look where others cannot, to find the signal in the noise. But I was the one who could not see until I met you. You are the signal. Everything else, all of it, is just noise. He took a breath. My vow is simple. It is not just I love you, though I do, more than I can quantify. My vow is I see you. I promise to see you always. Not the daughter they wanted you to be. Not the scientist the world expects you to be. Just you, Lydia, my partner, my true north. I will always see you. Professor Finch grunted, clearly moved. Well, the rings. We did not have a ring bearer. Professor Finch reached into his own worn blazer pocket, and pulled out two simple brushed silver bands, as if they were specimens he had collected. Nico's hand was warm and steady, as he slid the cool silver onto my finger. It fit perfectly. I did the same for him. As my hand slid the ring onto his, as the two bands of metal touched, the sun, now low and fiery on the horizon, broke through the last line of distant clouds. It struck the rings. A single, blinding flash of pure white light. The Tideline cameraman, a shadow on the periphery, pivoted. The professional photographer's shutter clicked, a rapid asterisk thwack, thwack, thwack star. It is the moment, Finch declared, his voice ringing out. The light, the rings, the sea, a perfect, singular point of data, captured forever by the authority vested in me by absolutely no one, but the intellectual consensus of this community. I pronounce you partners. Now go do the work. Nico cupped my face. He kissed me. And it was not a performance. It was not for a camera. It was a conclusion. It was the ceiling of a data set. The applause that erupted was not the polite, hesitant golf course clap of my family's events. It was a roar. It was a standing ovation from the giants of my field. It was loud. It was joyous. It was deeply, profoundly real. The Tideline camera, as promised, stayed focused on us. But I saw, out of the corner of my eye, the professional photographer, the one who worked for nature journals, snapping candids of the guests. I imagined what he was capturing. I imagined my mother, Elaine, looking at the woman beside her, who was weeping with open joy. That woman was Elena Sophia from the Max Planck Institute. A legend. My mother, I knew, would be looking at her, confused. She was trapped in a room where her currency, her social standing, her husband's money, Sloane's beauty, was worthless. Here, the only currency was achievement, and she had none. The photographer moved, drawn by the visual tension of the isolated back row. He saw Sloane in her stark white dress, a statue of ice. He was a journalist, and he smelled a conflict. He lowered his camera slightly. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice polite. "Are you with the research team as well?" I saw Sloane, her social training kicking in, turn on a bright, brittle smile. She thought he was a wedding photographer she could charm. "Oh no," she said with her practiced, airy laugh. "I am in marketing." "Ah," the photographer said. He did not judge her. He did not mock her. He did something far worse. He lost interest. He saw nothing more to capture. He turned his back on her, his lens seeking out Petra Lang, and left my sister standing alone in her white dress. Her one line of dialogue delivered to an empty, windy field. I turned away from them. I turned back to Nico. He took my hand. I looked at the front row, my colleagues, my mentors, my family, all of them smiling, all of them seeing me. I looked at the marsh, at the high-tech tide robot sitting on the rock, its small red indicator light blinking patiently, recording, recording, recording. I had spent my entire life trying to exist in their coordinate system. I had tried to plot myself on a map where I was always in the wrong quadrant, always the anomaly, always the data point that had to be thrown out. Today, I had not moved. I had simply held my ground. And I had made the world shift to my coordinate system. A world where work was a virtue, where data was truth, and where love was a rigorous, compassionate, peer-reviewed partnership. And in my world, I was finally perfectly in the right place. Nico squeezed my hand. I looked west, out over the ocean. The sun, a perfect, burning gold disk, was just touching the sharp blue line of the water. The golden hour had arrived. The world was lit. For this one perfect moment in pure, undeniable light. The golden hour, as all field scientists know, is a brief and beautiful illusion. It is the moment of perfect light just before the cold. Functional darkness sets in. As the last sliver of the sun vanished, the world did not end. It simply transitioned. The preserve, bathed in the sharp, fiery glow of the sunset, was now illuminated by a new, more practical light, fire. Our lab team and the catering crew, moving with practiced efficiency, had ignited 3 massive, waist-high iron fire pits, which were now roaring against the deep sapphire of the twilight. The wind had died down to a whisper, and the cold was no longer biting. It was held at bay by the circumference of warmth. The formal rows of chairs from the ceremony vanished. In their place, long rustic wooden tables were set up, laden not with delicate canapes, but with the substance of the sea itself. This was the reception, a full, roaring New England clam bake. Steamers, lobsters, smoked mussels, and charred corn were piled on platters. 2 men, who looked more like fishermen than caterers, were shucking local oysters by the hundreds, their knives flashing in the firelight. The soundscape of the wedding shifted. Nico's ambient waves were replaced by the crackle of wood, the clack of shells, and most of all, the sound of 60 of the world's most intelligent people talking at once. This was not small talk. This was not the polite, sterile murmur of Sloane's cocktail hour. This was a convocation. As I walked among the tables, a metal mug of hot cider in my hand, I heard it. Professor Watanabe was in a high-speed, joyful argument with Nico, sketching a robotic actuator design on a napkin. Dr. Elena Sophia, her face bright with passion, was cornering a donor. Not about money, but about the flawed carbon credit system. The air was electric. They were eating, yes, but they were working. They were solving problems. They were celebrating in the only way our community knows how, by passionately engaging with the work. Then the buzz of conversation quieted. Dr. Petra Lang, holding her own mug of cider, had stood up on the same boulder Professor Finch had used. She did not need a microphone. Her voice cut through the air. "I will not make a toast," she began, and the crowd laughed. "Toasts are for politicians. I will make an observation. For 50 years, my generation of scientists was defined by asking for permission. We asked permission for funding. We asked permission to be in the room. We asked permission to have our data taken seriously." Her eyes, sharp and clear in the firelight, found me. "That era is over," she said, her voice ringing with absolute finality. "Lydia, Nico, you are the proof. You did not ask permission to do this. You did not ask permission to be brilliant. You did not ask permission to build a life on your own terms. You simply did the work. You defined your own parameters. You are the new precedent." She raised her mug. "To the work, and to the generation that has finally stopped asking for permission. To the work." The crowd roared, and 60 mugs were raised. I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the fire or the cider. It was validation. It was the feeling of a hypothesis being proven, not just in the lab time and over, but in life. I felt a presence near me and turned. It was Dr. Sam Harding, the jovial, loudmouth giant from British Columbia. "Ward," he boomed, clapping me on the shoulder hard enough to spill my drink. "That was a hell of a speech from Petra, but she is right. I was just rereading your larval dispersal paper on the flight over." I froze. "Oh no, Professor, you don't have to." "Nonsense," he laughed. "That methodology, the way you cross-reference the genetic markers with the tidal simulation, it was asterisk chef's kiss star. It was elegant. That paper is going to be standard reading for every new class. Your citation count on that one alone is going to be higher than my last 5 publications combined. You have made the rest of us look lazy." "Ward, brilliant." From the shadow just behind Dr. Harding, I saw a flicker of movement. My mother, Elaine, she had been lurking, her pale blue silk dress looking flimsy and absurd in this rugged environment. She had heard. She had no idea what larval dispersal was. She did not know what a methodology was, but she had heard, with perfect, terrifying clarity, the one phrase that mattered in her world: citation count higher than my last 5 publications. She understood metrics. She understood status. And she had just heard a man, who was clearly important, confirm that I had a status she could not comprehend. She looked pale. Not just pale, she looked nauseated. She was seeing, perhaps for the first time, a world where her rules did not apply, where her currency was not accepted, a world where I was not the failure but the asset, and she had no stake in it. The Tideline crew, who had been respectfully documenting the party, found their next shot. One of the lab's graduate students had, to my complete surprise, produced an acoustic guitar. He was sitting on a driftwood log, and a small group had gathered. Dr. Harding, in his element, was leading them in a surprisingly good, if boisterous, rendition of a 90s rock song. The camera focused on their faces, lit by the fire, laughing and singing terribly off-key. Science, it turned out, knew how to have fun. It was in this moment of pure, unguarded joy that the first variable made its move. My mother stepped out of the shadows. Her face was a mask of practiced concern. The one she used when a neighbor's dog had died. She walked directly to me, ignoring Dr. Harding, who had moved on to the oyster bar. "Lydia," she said, her voice a low, theatrical whisper. "Lydia, honey." I stood still. I did not offer her a drink. I did not offer her a seat by the fire. I just waited. Lydia, she tried again. I had no idea. She gestured around at the firelight, at the laughing professors, at the Tideline camera. If I had known it was this, all these important people, the cameras, we thought this was just some little sad beach thing. The honesty of her insult was almost breathtaking. She was not apologizing. She was lamenting a missed opportunity. Known what, Mother? I asked, my voice as calm and steady as the tide. You have known I existed for 31 years. Her face tightened. The mask of concern slipped, revealing the cold anger beneath. Do not be cruel, Lydia. You know what I mean. You did this to us, to humiliate us, after everything we gave Sloane. You made this competition. There it was, the boundary. I planted my feet in the sand. No, I said. You are wrong. This is the last time I will explain this. So I will be very clear. This event is not about you. It is for us. My work, my life, my partnership. They are not about you. They are not a reaction to you. They simply are. And I do not need your permission to be happy. Happy? A new voice hissed. Sloane. She stepped up next to my mother, a united pale blue and ivory front. Her face in the firelight was ugly with a rage I had never seen on her. Her perfect pretty mask had melted. You call this happy? Sloane spat. This nerdy freak show. This is just the most pathetic thing you have ever done. Are you done? Did you get what you wanted? Are you enjoying competing for the spotlight? Lydia. I looked at my sister, the product of 30 years of being told she was the sun. She genuinely believed this was all about her. The old Lydia, the data point anomaly, would have crumbled. She would have apologized. She would have cried. But I was no longer that person. I am Dr. Ward. I am not competing with you, Sloane, I said, my voice soft, but carrying more weight than any shout. I am competing with the person I was yesterday, and I am winning. Silence. Sloane's mouth opened, then closed. She had no response. The data was incompatible with her operating system. My mother looked at my father, who was still hovering in the darkness, but he refused to meet her gaze. Into this vacuum of stunned silence, a new voice cut through. All right, I think we are done here, Cousin Beth. She stepped out of the crowd, holding 2 mugs of cider, her lawyer mode fully engaged. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Elaine, Sloane, she said, her voice pleasant but laced with steel. Lydia just set a boundary. You both just sprinted right over it like it was a finish line. This is a private event. The show is over. You have 2 choices. Respect the boundary and go get a plate of food, or you can leave the beach. She took a sip of cider. Your choice. Sloane looked like she had been slapped. My mother turned to my father, her eyes pleading. Victor, are you going to let her talk to us this way? Victor Ward, for the first time, stepped into the light. He looked old. He looked defeated. His navy blazer was rumpled. He looked at me, at Beth, at the roaring, happy, brilliant party he was not a part of. He did not say a word. He just took my mother's arm, a gesture not of support, but of retreat. He turned and began to walk toward the dark parking lot. Father, Sloane cried, panicked. You are not just leaving. Trent, her silent, bored husband, finally found his voice. Come on, Sloane. It is cold. He grabbed her arm, and he pulled her. They retreated, the 4 of them. My biological family walking away from the firelight, away from the warmth, away from the laughter, and back into the cold, indifferent dark. The Tideline camera, I noticed, had been on me the entire time. The cameraman had, at the first sign of confrontation, moved to capture my reaction, but he had not followed them. Sophia Tilson, the producer, stood near him. I saw her tap his shoulder. "No," she whispered. "Stay on her. We are not chasing them. The story is here." The sound mix of the documentary, I realized, would not be of my family's angry, retreating whispers. It would be the sound of the guitar, the crackle of the fire, and the steady, rhythmic crash of the ocean waves, the soundtrack of my life. I stood there for a long moment, my hands wrapped around my mug. I was breathing. I was steady. Nico appeared at my side. He did not ask what happened. He did not need to. He just handed me a fresh, steaming mug of cider, taking my cold one. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, his shoulder brushing mine. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of wood smoke and salt. I looked out at the ocean. The tide was at its lowest point. The water, a sheet of black, calm glass. "Yes," I said, and I meant it. "I am. The sea is calm tonight." Across the beach, on the rocks overlooking the flats, a single tiny red light blinked patiently in the dark. Nico's time-lapse robot, our silent, objective witness, was still recording. The night and its story was just beginning. 6 weeks felt, in scientific terms, like a geologic epoch. It was 6 weeks of a quiet, pressurized truce with the world. 6 weeks of Nico and me going back to the lab, processing the data from the marsh, and pointedly not checking the internet. Sophia Tilson, the producer from Tideline, had kept her word. She sent us the final cut of the episode 2 days before it aired. We watched it in the lab's small, dark screening room, just the two of us, on a Tuesday night. It was 52 minutes long. It was titled, Science. A Sunset Vow. And it was, in a word, true. Sophia had been surgical. It was not a reality show. It was a documentary about the ocean and about the work, framed by the narrative of two people committing their lives to that work. The camera lingered on the marsh, on the bubbling equipment, on the complex schematics Nico had designed. It captured Petra Lang's speech with a reverence that made my eyes burn. It showed the science, the laughter, the fire, the joy, and my family. They were an absence. Sophia had not used the confrontation. She had not used the argument. She had instead used one single, devastatingly objective shot. It was filmed from a distance, the four of them, Elaine, Victor, Sloane, and Trent, in their inappropriate, fashionable clothes, turning their backs on the firelight. It showed them walking away from the circle of warmth and laughter, retreating as four small, dark figures into the cold, black expanse of the night. There was no audio of them, just the visual data they had chosen to leave. The episode went live at 9 p.m. Eastern. Nico and I were at home eating takeout, pretending it was just another night. I had turned my phone off. At 10 p.m., with a deep breath, I turned it back on. It was not a buzz, it was a detonation. The first alert I saw was a frantic text from our lab's IT director. "What is happening?" The Atlantic Resilience Lab website was down. It had crashed at approximately 9:08 p.m. It had remained down for nearly 20 minutes. The servers designed for polite academic inquiries had been overwhelmed by a tidal wave of global traffic. Everyone, it seemed, was trying to find the Gulls Lantern donation page at the same moment. The Views, Tideline, which had projected a respectable 100,000 views for the first week, stopped sending us projections. They just sent the real numbers. It did not climb. It jumped from 200,000 views in the first hour to over 800,000 by morning. By the end of the week, it had crossed 2 million. By the end of the month, Tideline confirmed it was tracking toward 5 million. It was a statistical outlier, an event horizon. The media, which had completely ignored the initial weird wedding buzz, now smelled the real story. The headlines were instant, and they were not about a family spat. Forbes ran a digital piece, Beyond the Registry, how two scientists turned a wedding vow into a $4 million conservation fund. It was a small, respected environmental journal. However, that gave the phenomenon its name. The headline was simple, and it was everywhere: a wedding that built a movement. That was the narrative. We had not thrown a party. We had built a movement. My inbox, the one I had so carefully curated against the static of my family, was breached. But this time, the flood was different. First, the invitation, a simple, elegant email from a senior curator. Dear Dr. Ward, the email began, the Global Selection Committee for TED would be honored if you would consider. I sat down on the floor. A TED Talk. Then the publishers, not one, but three. Three separate, competing, and very serious emails from senior editors at major publishing houses. They did not want to tell all. They did not want a memoir about my family. They wanted a book about my work, The New Ocean, The Data of Resilience, a scientist's guide to seeing the world. The world had, in the span of 6 weeks, collectively reviewed the data, and come to a new conclusion. I was not weird, or difficult, or an atmosphere. I was, it turned out, insightful. But it was the other messages, the ones from the public, that I printed out. I taped them to the wall above my desk. A new set of data points. They came from everywhere, from high school students in Ohio, from teachers in Florida, from other women in STEM, from all over the world. One read, Dear Dr. Ward, I am a sophomore in engineering. I am the only girl in my advanced thermodynamics class. I am always called too intense. I watched your wedding. I watched you and Dr. Lang. I watched you not apologize for being brilliant. Thank you for making me feel like I am not weird. Thank you for showing me that I am just in the right room. Finally, another read, I am 35. I am a lawyer. I left my toxic family years ago. I have been told my whole life that I am unfamiliar. Watching you stand there surrounded by your real family. Your colleagues made me realize I am not unfamiliar. I am just building my own. Thank you. I read them until 3 o'clock in the morning, my eyes burning, and I understood. The wedding was not the point. The vows were not the point. The boundary was the point. And then there was the other side. The family that had defined its entire existence by a narrative of perfection was now facing an unexpected global peer review. It began, as it always did, with performance. My mother, Elaine, after a full week of strategic silence, reactivated her social media. She posted the most beautiful, cinematic still from the documentary, me and Nico, silhouetted by the firelight, laughing. Her caption was a masterpiece of revisionist history. So incredibly proud of our daughter, Dr. Lydia Ward, and her wonderful new husband, Nico. We were so moved to be there for this magical scientific moment. A mother's heart is full. We were so moved to be there. The internet, as it turns out, keeps receipts. The community that had just embraced the episode as a testament to truth, they remembered. They had seen the original crossed hashtags. They had seen the articles. And my mother had just, in her own desperate way, confirmed the narrative. The comments on her post were not just negative, they were factual. The first reply, were you moved when you uninvited her from her sister's wedding, or was that a different magical moment? Another, proud. Is that why you were sitting in the quarantine zone 20 feet behind everyone else? We saw that. And then the kill shot. Someone, it must have been Beth leaking the evidence, posted the screenshot. It was my mother's original uninvitation text. The "you will ruin the atmosphere" text. It was posted without comment, as a direct reply to her proud post. It was a public Viva session. The consequences were not emotional. They were corporate. Sloane worked in marketing. Her entire professional identity was based on a curated image of aspirational perfection and family values. Her company, a high-end lifestyle brand, saw the comments. They saw the screenshots. They saw their employee being publicly and accurately labeled a bully. It was an image problem. According to Beth, they received over 500 emails and social media tags about it. Sloane's contract, which was up for renewal, was quietly not renewed. They called it corporate restructuring. We all knew what it was. My father's situation was more delicate. Victor Ward was a senior partner at a wealth management firm. His entire brand was stability, legacy, tradition. The story from the documentary of the two worlds, the two families, the two value systems was now common knowledge in his professional circles. His clients, many of them self-made, did not like the optics. It made him look petty. It made him look weak. It made him look like a bad judge of character. He was not fired. He was, as the internal memo apparently stated, strongly encouraged to take an early retirement package to focus on his family. He was 62. He was put out to pasture. My mother's response was predictable. She went on the offensive. She told anyone who would listen, her book club, the neighbors, that it was all the edit. They cut me out, she wailed. According to Beth, we had a beautiful, tearful reconciliation with Lydia, and those Hollywood producers edited it out to make her look like a victim. It is all fake. They used a special lens to make us look far away. We were right there crying with joy. Sophia Tilson, who had clearly anticipated this line of defense, did something masterful. Tideline released a director's cut bonus clip to its streaming platform. It was titled The One Take Shot. It was the raw, unedited 5-minute footage from the camera that had been trained on me during the confrontation. My "you have known I existed for 31 years" line. My "I am not competing with you" line to Sloane. Beth's "respect the boundary" line. And the final, long, silent shot of the four of them retreating into the dark. There were no cuts. There was no dramatic music. It was just the unvarnished truth. Tideline posted it with a simple caption, "Tideline stands by our factual reporting. The story is the story." My mother's edit defense evaporated. The requests for interviews were relentless. Morning shows, lifestyle magazines, newspapers, they all wanted the family story. They all wanted the revenge angle. I declined every single one except one. I gave a single 15-minute interview to a popular, sober-minded science podcast, and I set the terms. I will not be discussing my family, I said, my voice clear and final. That is my private data, and it is not for public review. My family is not the story. The story is that our oceans are acidifying at a rate we have never before witnessed. The story is that we are losing entire ecosystems before we can even catalogue them. If you want to talk about my wedding, let's talk about the reason for it. Let's talk about the data. Let's talk about the sea. And for 15 minutes, I did. I talked about coral. I talked about larval dispersal. I talked about hope. I talked about the work. The noise eventually died down, but the narrative was set. Beth sent me one last text. It was a meme already circulating in the academic community. It was a 2-panel image. Top panel, a picture of Sloane's opulent, 7-tiered wedding cake. The caption, guest list. Bottom panel, A picture of the 60 scientists roaring with laughter around the fire pit, mugs raised. The caption, guest list. Beth's text underneath. I think you mean guess, as in guess who just defined the new in crowd. The nerds won. Liddy, we won. The final report came from Tideline. Sophia called me, not as a producer, but as a colleague. Lydia, she said, her voice full of laughter. You are not going to believe this. Science, A Sunset Vow, has just been logged as our most rewatched episode of the entire year, by a margin of almost 40%. It beat the one on serial killers. Why? I asked, genuinely baffled. We are not sure, she said. But the analytics show the highest rewatch spike is on one specific scene. The vows, I guessed. No, she said. It is the part where Petra Lang raises her mug and says, to the generation that has finally stopped asking for permission. They keep watching that part over and over. It seems, Dr. Ward, you accidentally started a movement. The explosion of Part 8 eventually settled. Like any massive release of energy, it left a new, altered landscape in its wake. The noise became background static, and the world, having consumed its fill of the story, moved on to the next one. It was 3 months later, deep in the cold, hard silence of a New England winter. When the new data point arrived, it was not a text. It was not a phone call. It was an email sent to my official work address from an account I did not recognize. The subject line was just one word, Lydia. I opened it. The sender was Sloane. Lydia, it began. There was no hey, Liddy. No exclamation points, no polite, airy buffer. I have been in therapy for 8 weeks. I was fired. My company said it was restructuring, but we know why. Trent's parents blame me for the scandal. Trent, it turns out, does not like it when things are not perfect. I am not writing this for sympathy. I am writing this to say that my therapist made me realize something. For 30 years, I have been the favorite. I thought it was a good thing. I thought it was what I had earned. But it was a job. And the main part of my job was making you invisible. I liked that job because it was easier than having to compete with you. I was terrified of competing with you. You did not steal my spotlight. I have been hoarding the spotlight for 3 decades thinking it would keep me warm. It did not. I do not expect you to forgive me. I am sorry for my part in it. It was real. I read the email. I closed it. I went to the lab. I ran a diagnostic on the new coastal sensors. I came home. I opened the email and read it again. It was the first true thing she had ever said to me. It was raw data, unprocessed and without interpretation. It was not a performance. Sloane, I replied, I am open to discussing the data. If this is real, if you are real, I am willing to meet. Not for a show, not for the family, but for the truth. You pick the place. One time, she picked a small, loud, aggressively neutral diner in a town halfway between Providence and the suburb she was now living in a small apartment by herself. She was already there when I walked in, sitting in a booth. She looked different, smaller. Her perfect blonde hair was pulled back in a simple, messy ponytail. She was not wearing the uniform, the expensive jewelry, the designer coat. She was just wearing a sweater. She looked tired. I sat down. A waitress slammed 2 water glasses onto the table. You look good, Lydia, Sloane said, her voice quiet, raspy. You look real, I said. It was the only compliment I could think of. She smiled, a small, brittle thing. I left Trent, she said. The day after I got fired, I realized the perfect life. It was just a box. It was a really, really expensive, pretty box. But it was suffocating. I was in it, too, just as much as you were. Outside of it, they only loved me when I was the shiny, uncomplicated one. The moment I became the Sloane with the scandal, they could not look at me. I am sorry, I said. And to my surprise, I meant it. Do not be, she said, shaking her head. It was a necessary variable. I needed to be uninvited, too, just from the whole perfect life. We talked for 2 hours. It was not a tearful reunion. It was a debriefing. It was like two survivors of the same shipwreck comparing notes. She told me about the therapy. She told me about the constant, crippling pressure to be the good daughter. The one who did not make waves. The one who always showed up, smiling for the photo. I am working, she said, blushing. It is just part-time for now, doing communications for an environmental non-profit, the Nature Conservancy. I stared at her. I know, she said, raising her hands. I know it is a total cliché. The angry marketing girl finds her soul. But it is the first time in my life I have ended a workday, and not felt completely empty. The pay is, it is awful. But I wrote a press release about river otters, and it felt good. We finished our coffee. The conversation was over. It was not fixed. 31 years of damage was not undone. But a new precedent had been set. So, she said, fiddling with her spoon. Are we okay? We are data in progress, I said. This is a good first data point. Sloane, keep collecting data. She understood. The next variable arrived on a Sunday. Nico and I were rigging a new set of wind sensors on the porch of our apartment. There was a knock. It was my father. He was alone. He was not in a blazer. He was wearing an old flannel shirt, the kind he used to wear to rake leaves. He looked hesitant. Lydia, he said. He was holding something in his hand, a small square box. Father, I said. Nico stayed on the porch, a silent, supportive shadow. He started. He looked down. I was cleaning out my office. The office at the firm. I was packing my things. I found this. He held out the box. It was a cheap, dark blue flocked velvet box, crushed at the corners. I opened it. Inside, on a faded satin bed, was my high school science medal. The one I had won for the national competition. The one I had never received at a ceremony because he had taken Sloane to a dress fitting. It was tarnished. The blue ribbon frayed. I was wrong, he said, his voice thick, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. I do not know the words, Lydia. I had the data. All these years I had this, and I ignored it. I ignored you. I was wrong. My heart, that cold, clinical muscle, ached. This was it. This was the moment I had waited for, the apology, the admission. I looked at the medal. I looked at his face. I did not hug him. I did not cry. I did not say, it is okay, because it was not. Thank you for returning it, I said, my voice soft. It meant a lot to me, Lydia, he pleaded. What do I do? You were wrong, I said, agreeing with his assessment. And this, I held up the medal, is a good, tangible piece of data, but it is not enough. This is one data point from 17 years ago. If we are going to build something new, it has to be with new data. It has to be with consistent, verifiable action, not status updates, not one-time apologies, behavior. Father, that is the only data I trust now. He nodded slowly. He understood. He was a numbers man. He understood verifiable action. Okay, he said. Behavior. Okay. He did not come inside. He left. My mother predictably remained the fixed variable. She was the control group. She continued her quiet, persistent campaign among her social circle that she was the victim of a malicious Hollywood edit. They cut me out, she wailed. She refused to see Sloane, who she now accused of siding with them and airing our dirty laundry. I did not engage. I did not argue. I put her, emotionally and digitally, into a permanent archive. But Victor started to change his behavior. 2 weeks later, I got a notification, an academic portal. Victor Ward has requested access to your paper. Larval dispersal and genetic resilience in *Acropora cervicornis star. I granted it. That night, my phone rang. It was him. Lydia, he said, his voice uncertain. I read it. The paper. I do not understand 90% of it. I do not understand what stochastic modeling is. That is okay, I said, sitting down. But, he said, and I heard the sound of papers rustling, this section on page 4, the data on the current velocities. Am I reading this right? Are you saying that the larvae, they are moving faster than the models predicted, not slower? I stopped. I held my breath. He was not asking about the documentary. He was not asking about the fight. He was not asking about Sloane's dress or my feelings. He was asking about the data. Yes, I said, a strange, slow warmth spreading through my chest. Yes, Father. That is exactly what I'm saying. The existing models are flawed. Let me walk you through it. Sloane, for her part, became the bridge. She was the only one who could speak both languages. She visited Victor, sitting with him as he tried to understand my work. She called me, giving me updates, acting as a buffer. She was, in her own quiet way, learning to stand on the side of truth, not just on the side of family. The next spring, Nico and I bought a house. It was not large. It was not opulent. It was a small, weather-beaten cottage on a bluff overlooking the bay. It had a workshop for him, a study for me, and a wind-battered deck. Our dining room table, a large, simple piece of reclaimed wood, has 8 chairs. There are only 2 of us, but we always keep the table set. There are always chairs, and there are always plates, waiting for the people who belong. For Petra when she's in town, for our colleagues, for Beth, and sometimes for Sloane. Last week, I received an email that finalized the new coordinate system. It was from the International Consortium for Reef Restoration. Dr. Ward, it began. After the overwhelming success of your presentation last year, and in light of the groundbreaking data you continue to publish, we would be honored if you, along with Dr. Kenji Watanabe, would agree to co-chair the upcoming international conference in Boston. I was not just a guest. I was not just a panelist. I was the chair. I printed the email. I walked it over to the small, empty chair at our table, the one that sometimes, I imagined my father might sit in. I was ready. The Harbor Light Convention Center was not a salt marsh. It was a billion-dollar structure of glass and steel, a monument to human engineering designed to keep the ocean at a safe, picturesque distance. I looked out the 40-foot-tall window at the Boston seafront, the gray waves crashing silently against the reinforced barrier. I was here, 1 year after our wedding, not as a guest, but as the co-chair of the International Consortium for Reef Restoration. Dr. Watanabe had delivered the morning keynote. I was scheduled to close the symposium. The final event, Tideline, who had become a permanent partner of the lab, was live-streaming the entire conference, but they had designated this last panel as a special event. The hall was packed. Thousands of attendees. The online portal, according to the technicians, had nearly 100,000 concurrent viewers. The panel's title was polite, academic, and dry: Science Family, Navigating Support Structures and Obstructions in High-Stress Research. It was my panel. The organizer, a young, nervous postdoc, was running the presentation tablet. And now, he said, his voice shaky, I would like to introduce our chair, Dr. Lydia Ward. But first, to give context to this discussion, we have a case study, a QR code. He fumbled with the tablet. A massive quick response code flashed onto the 20-foot-tall screen behind me. It was the wrong code. It was not the link to the panel's agenda. It was the guest list meme, the one comparing Sloane's 7-tiered cake to the 60 scientists at my fire pit. A low murmur rippled through the audience. They recognized it. The story had become a legend in our community. Then, in the third row, Dr. Sam Harding let out a loud, joyous laugh. He started clapping. The murmur turned into a wave of warm, knowing applause. The live stream chat monitor, visible at the foot of the stage, exploded. Guest list. Guest list. The organizer turned a shade of crimson. I am so sorry, Dr. Ward. That is the wrong file. No, I said, walking to the podium, the applause settling. It is exactly the right file. The audience laughed. I was about to begin to use the moment to pivot to the real topic, when a new sound cut through the hall. A commotion side stage. I am her mother. I do not need a badge. Let me through. A technician was holding up a hand, trying to block her, but she was relentless. Elaine, my mother, she was not in her muted suburban uniform. She was in a bright coral pink suit, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup thick enough for television. She burst past the technician and walked uninvited onto the stage. The hall went silent, the kind of absolute, total silence that precedes a catastrophic failure. The tideline cameras, which had been set for a wide shot, pivoted, focusing on her. Lydia, she said, her voice amplified by the stage microphones she did not realize were live. She was beaming, a smile of terrifying, practiced brilliance. Lydia, darling, I had to. She was walking toward me. She was opening her arms. I wanted everyone to see, she said, her voice dropping into a register of tearful, profound pride, to see that we are so proud that we have all reconciled. She was 3 feet from me now, her arms wide, her smile fixed, her eyes screaming at me, hug me. Hug me for the cameras. Give me this. This was the moment. The performance she had been denied. The ultimate photo op. The mother forgiving and proud, embracing her difficult, successful daughter on the world stage. I did not move. I did not lift my arms. I did not step into her embrace. I stood at the podium, my hands resting on my notes. I looked at my mother. I looked at the thousands of people watching. I looked at the red recording light of the camera. And I leaned into the microphone. My voice was calm. It was clear. It was not angry. It was just factual. Thank you for coming, Mother. I appreciate that you are here. Elaine's smile wavered. Her arms were still open. But I continued, my voice echoing in the vast, silent hall. Reconciliation is a verb, not a noun. It is a long, difficult, data-driven process. It requires work. It is not a photograph. It is not one single hug for a camera. Her arms dropped. The mask cracked. I turned my attention just slightly to the audience. We had a rule when we planned the event you all just saw on that QR code. A very strict rule. I see our Tideline producer Sophia in the front row. She will confirm this. We put a clause in our contract. No children were to be exploited for the story. No child was to be made a prop. I let that hang in the air. I stand by that. I believe that children, all children, deserve to grow up in an environment where their accomplishments are the story, where they are seen for their minds, for their data, not just for their ability to look good in a family photo. They deserve to be recognized for their achievements. My mind flashed to a lost, tarnished medal in a velvet box. Even when those achievements are not pretty, even when they are inconvenient, even when they do not match the family's preferred narrative. The silence was absolute. The cameras were on me, but I knew where to look. I looked out past the blinding stage lights to the seats near the back. The ones I had reserved, row 30. My father was there. He had come, and Sloane was beside him. As I spoke, I watched Victor Ward. He did not look away. He did not hide. He bowed his head. It was not a gesture of shame. It was a gesture of acceptance, of quiet, final acknowledgement. And Sloane, my sister, who was not performing, who was just Sloane, she reached over in the dark and she took our father's hand. She held it. It was real. I turned back to the microphone. My voice had found its final gear. My family, I said, is not the story. This, I gestured to the conference, to the research posters, to the Tideline cameras, this work is the story. But the question of this panel is how to navigate obstruction, how to get revenge. I am asked that a lot. People see that video, they see the articles, and they want to know how I won. I took a breath. This was the conclusion. This was the abstract, the thesis, the final peer-reviewed result. Here is my data on that, I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that felt like it was coming not from me, but through me. I did not get revenge by tearing anyone down. I did not get revenge by uninviting, or by fighting or by exposing. That is just more noise. That is just participating in their broken system. I got revenge by building. I got revenge by building a life, by building a partnership, by building a body of work so strong and so true that their permission, their approval, their invitation, it just became completely and totally irrelevant. The hall was so quiet. I could hear the hum of the ballast lights. Then the explosion. It was not a golf clap. It was not polite applause. It was a roar. It was a standing ovation that shook the floor. Thousands of people, scientists, academics, students, researchers, were on their feet, yelling, whistling, clapping. It was a deafening wave of validation. On the live stream monitor, I could not even read the text. It was a solid, cascading waterfall of one phrase. Build. Beg. Build. Beg. Build. I nodded once. I did not smile. I just accepted the data. I stepped back from the podium. The panel, I knew, was over. The applause was still thundering as I walked off the stage, into the heat of the lights, into the wings, into the shadows. My mother was waiting. Her face was a ruin. The mask was gone. She was just a confused, angry, defeated woman. She was waiting for me. She was still, even now, waiting for the hug, waiting for the reconciliation, waiting for me to fix it. I walked past her. Lydia, she whispered, her hand reaching out. I did not stop, but I paused. For 1/2 second, I looked at her not as my mother, but as a failed experiment. Mother, I said, my voice too quiet for any microphone. It is not about a picture. It is not about a moment. You can start by listening. I left her in the shadow of the stage. I kept walking, past the technicians, past the cables, toward the back of the hall. A hand emerged from the darkness. Nico. He had been waiting by the exit. He did not say a thing. He did not need to. He just held out his hand. I took it. His hand was warm, calloused, and real. He did not lead me to the parking garage. He did not lead me to the lobby. He led me to a heavy, metal, unmarked door, a fire exit. He pushed the horizontal bar. The door swung open. The sound hit me first. The sterile, air-conditioned, applause-filled hum of the convention center was instantly, totally obliterated by a rushing, chaotic roar. The sound of the real ocean. The door opened onto the seafront. The wind hit my face, cold and sharp, and the smell, the undeniable, sharp, living smell of salt and low tide, the smell of the work, the smell of home. The Tide Line cameraman, a true professional, had followed me. He was filming from behind, capturing the scene, my silhouette framed in the doorway, the hot artificial lights of the stage behind me and the deep, cold, twilight blue of the real world in front of me. We stood there, Nico and I, on the threshold. I turned my head just for a second, half my face in the light, half in the shadow. I looked straight down the barrel of the lens, a final objective data point. Then I turned my back on the camera. I turned away from the light. I took Nico's hand, and I stepped with him out of the noise and into the blue.